a dear friend of mine, was rather interested in the deep web. It was from him that I first heard this name, at the innocent age of 12. From what he told me, deep web sounded like a cool place but with lists of dangerous things. He would just come and tell me about things he found, and I would listen with fascination. This continued for a long time. Once I thought that I was informed enough, I accompanied him with some of his browsing ventures. He was an adventurous personality, but the ones in which I was with him were purely educational-ish. We were reading about various things one would usually not find on the surface web, like reports saying CIA flew planes over DC, highly knowledgeable debates like if Illuminati was real, where people gave very solid and concrete evidences, unlike absurd correlations and coincidences we hear about on the surface web. A couple of times we also went to a little less educational sites, but only driven by curiosity and nothing else. We even visited the famous website of Silk Road. It was shut down some time later. DeepNet was an interesting place, but only if we were on the safe side. He was my BFF, and more than talking, we preferred to converse in chit-chats. This is because liked keeping an account of it. We were also the kind of fantasists that liked to discuss our creations but never wanted our chit-chat to be known to anyone. I knew my friend was a little rebellious and need to be kept in check. For this reason I used to keep checking on him if he was on the safer side or not. One day he confessed to me that he had been visiting sites one should never visit irrespective of age or anything. And he had been doing this for a long time now. Long exposure to the deep web has made me much more insensitive than I was. It didn't come to me as a surprise, but I was still uncomfortable about this. At this point, not even by the mentality of people who supported it. I reckon that sooner or later we will find this stuff. What bothered me was the sheer danger he had put himself into by going to such places. From that day on, I did not accompany him to any of his ventures. I had heard about kids who went to the dark web not return in full. A few weeks did pass after that. We used to see one another in the school, but we stopped talking about his nighttime explorations. We continued to talk, but in a time as little as a few weeks I could see him change. Even our conversation fell out 2 weeks later. We simply went to school together, and came back without saying a word or sharing any emotion. The one fine morning when I came across his house on my way to school, I saw was a huge amount of commotion around. Today I was before time and the bus wouldn't be here for the next 10 minutes. I started going inside to inquire but was prohibited to. An eerie stench enveloped the house and the authorities were all around. I wasn't even allowed into the house. I got to know he has been brutally murdered last night. This wasn't told to me, but I researched around and found that the person who killed him left a video recording of the heinous crime. Never in the sanity of my mind could I imagine someone would have the audacity and the guts to do that. I did not go to the school that day. Since I was close to him, I was among the first to be questioned. I told them all that I knew, except that I also accompanied him in some of the less educational ventures long ago. I was old enough, in my opinion. I insisted that I be let me see the video footage. I was denied over and over until in the 5th session of questioning they had with me when they showed me. All I can say, I say that I regret making that demand. He had many acquaintances but not many friends, and I was one of the closest. I knew him more than his own parents. There were many things they found on the scene of crime that they asked me about. We was a weird people and collected many curious things. Some of his I knew of and others even I didn't. Originally he had got this habit from me. We would share newly collected items we found interesting. This could be mere pebbles, some craft made but us, or utter garbage we had been holding on for some reason. For some reasons I was asked about each and every one of the curious thing he kept in his room. Among them was a less curious object. A notebook, in which he had written in what they called a curious script that they couldn't decipher. Also in the same notebook were poems and thoughts of his. I knew the notebook. Each one of his had such mismanaged thought journals. The reason they were so interested in the notebook was that the last thing he ever did was to write in it in that very curious script. He can actually be seen writing in the beginning of the video. It could be seen that while writing, he was showing great signs of distress. They suspected that the notebook might hold some clues, however, the notebook couldn't be deciphered as the notebook was soaked in blood over washable ink. My handwriting was also seen in the notebook at various places. I told them that we wrote our collaborated work of literature in it. I told them that I do not know or understand the cipher he used. The investigation went on for about 2 years. Once the trail ran cold and investigation into it stopped, his possessions were given back. I requested that I be allowed to keep the notebook as I had some of my poems in it and memories. They allowed me. I came home, by this time much older than I was that day, and kept it carefully along with other notebooks. Those ones had different things written in them but in the same cipher. I invented that cipher when I was 16. The purpose of our communication. I can't see what he wrote in it clearly, but the words I read haunt me. Why he don't call someone that night? I don't know. Footnote: this is a work of fiction, a creepypasta I wrote at the innocent age of 12 for the spooks. However, I can tell you, you will come across something creepy and unexpected every single day you browse the deep web. May it just be deranged experiments of people, stalking other people, or whatnot. This is not because deep web is deranged, it is because it offers us a golden opportunity to be anonymous, and hence be our true selves unhindered and meet with people of similar interests. Pedophiles exist in each and every society around the world, however only on places like the deep web can they freely talk about their tabooed desires. This makes it a heaven for liberating ideas as well as the abyss of mischief. I live in India and people here seldom have any knowledge about dark web. Even for the time I thought that I was the only one in my area who surfed dark web. But boy, I was so wrong. One day I came across this chat room while browsing dark web, which seemed some kind of occult meeting. I shouldn't have joined it, biggest mistake of my life. First they were praising goddess Kali, Hindu goddess of destruction. Then everyone started telling their miseries and all kind of bad stuff happening in their life. The admin/cult leader told everyone that everything would be alright if we got a man's sacrifice. Almost everybody started messaging that they would give sacrifice for the group. That their life was not worth living. I wasn't suicidal like them, but I was just messing around, so without giving any thought I also agreed to give an oblation. Suddenly my screen went pitch black. And a message in caps started flashing. We choose you, Sarthak. You will give your head in the name of Kali Ma, for the well-being of all of us. Feel proud that we have chosen you. My head started throbbing and my limbs turned into noodles after reading the above message. I tried to get hold of my laptop, but it seemed like someone had hacked it. I tried to shut it down, but all in vain, so I just removed its battery and crept into my bed under the sheets. No one was home that night except me and my little brother Rohan. My mom was in a nearby house for Jagran, and Dad was out of town. I comforted myself with the belief that all of this was a lame joke by some unemployed shitheads who got kicked by cyber-bullying 13 years old. No one was coming for me. But what if it was all true? If they could hack my laptop, they might come for me. It was no big deal for them to track me down. After double-checking the front and back doors of my house, I went in Rohan's room to check on him and found him safe and sound, sleeping like an angel in his crib. I kissed him on his forehead and laid down on the bed beside his crib. I thought of calling my mother, but I didn't want to ruin her night just because I had a hunch that someone was going to murder me. Really, I was not in my best mind that day. In middle of night, I woke up as I heard a loud bang and a grunt after that. Someone was in the house. Crap, I forgot about the terrace door. I tried in vain to push the sofa with all the strength a 13-year-old could gather, to place it in front of my room's door because its latch was broken. But then I started hearing groaning and whimpering like someone was in pain. I opened the door cautiously and turned the hallway lights on. A big beastly man who was donning a black mask was lying on the ground near staircase. There was broken Lego castle and its pieces lying around the man, which me and my brother made some time ago. My brother was playing with it on the middle landing of the staircase that evening. The man was gasping for air as he was lying in the pool of his own blood, a hatchet lying beside him. Basically, he fell down from the stairs, tripping on the Lego castle, which he was not able to decipher in dark, and cracked his skull. I felt a taste of vomit in my mouth. I picked up Rohan, who was surprisingly still asleep, and ran outside to Jagran venue. I found my mother and told her about a burglar in our house. My mother and neighbors called the police on the scene, and the man was taken to the hospital. Doctors weren't able to save him. I concluded that it was all my fault. That the man was the member of the cult group and he had come to kill me. But I didn't dare to tell my parents about my dark web misadventure. I dread my father would kill me. But if we go according to the police, the breaking and entering in our house had nothing to do with some cult. As they identified the criminal, who was a petty local goon, infamous for robberies and BREs. That night was nothing else but his another quest, which went wrong. I think that's a pure bullshit. What a crazy coincidence, that on that very night I had received a death threat, and surprisingly after 4 to 5 hours later a man broke in our house carrying a hatchet. Whatever the case was, one fact remains true, that I was traumatized for life. Maybe I might get killed that night because I was such a dumbass is more than enough for me. But also the fact that I put my little brother's life in danger. I can never forgive myself for that. Hey there! I'm new but putting my all into sharing real horror stories. Your support is my motivation. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your comments mean the world to me. Let's make this journey together. In the dim glow of my computer screen, I navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the dark web. It was a place of forbidden allure, a digital underworld where anonymity reigned supreme, and access to realms beyond the reach of ordinary browsing was tantalizingly close. Despite the warnings and the whispered tales of its dangers, I felt drawn to explore, to peel back the layers of secrecy and delve into the darker recesses of the internet. As I clicked through various forums and chat rooms, I stumbled upon a particularly disturbing corner, a gathering place for those who identified as bug chasers. The term itself sent a shiver down my spine. Bug chasers, individuals who actively sought out sexually transmitted diseases, who reveled in the taboo and the dangerous. Curiosity mingled with revulsion as I read through the posts and conversations. The discussions were graphic, the language raw and unfiltered. People shared their desires openly, boasting about their conquests and exchanging tips on how to avoid detection while pursuing their dangerous liaisons. It was a twisted subculture, a community bound together by their shared obsession with infection and transmission. Despite my initial disgust, I found myself drawn deeper into the world of the bug chasers. I read stories of reckless encounters, of individuals boasting about infecting unsuspecting partners with HIV, chlamydia, and syphilis. The anonymity of the dark web seemed to embolden these individuals, allowing them to indulge their darkest desires without fear of consequence. But amidst the tales of depravity, there was one story that stood out to me. It was from 2007, a chilling account of a bug chaser who had injected several men with HIV-positive blood during a sex party. The sheer audacity of such an act left me feeling sick to my stomach. I couldn't comprehend the mindset of someone who would willingly endanger the lives of others for their own pleasure. As I continued to explore, I stumbled upon a forum thread discussing the logistics of bug-chasing parties. The participants spoke casually about their plans, exchanging tips on how to evade law enforcement and avoid detection. It was a disturbing glimpse into a world I never knew existed, a world where the pursuit of pleasure was taken to dangerous and reckless extremes. As I closed my laptop, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered within me. The dark web was a cesspool of depravity and danger, a place where the darkest impulses of humanity were laid bare. I made a mental note to tread carefully in the future, to always use protection and never take unnecessary risks. For in the shadows of the internet, there were monsters lurking, monsters who thrived on the suffering of others, who preyed on the unsuspecting and the vulnerable. And I vowed to never become one of their unwitting victims. The thought of encountering such dangers online, where anonymity can embolden individuals to engage in reckless behavior, added to the unsettling atmosphere of the story. I was never one to shy away from the darker corners of the internet. The thrill of the unknown always drew me in like a moth to a flame. But little did I know my curiosity would lead me down a path from which there would be no return. It started innocently enough. Late one night, fueled by a combination of boredom and morbid fascination, I found myself delving into the depths of the dark web. The usual array of illegal drugs, counterfeit goods, and illicit services greeted me, but I craved something more. Something that would truly test the limits of my resolve. That's when I stumbled upon a forum dedicated to the macabre. It was a haven for those who reveled in the grotesque, a place where the darkest desires of humanity were laid bare for all to see. Intrigued, I began to explore further, clicking on links that promised access to unspeakable horrors. As I navigated through the labyrinthine network of sites, I came across a chat room where users exchanged stories of death and destruction with a casualness that sent chills down my spine. It was here that I first heard whispers of the Red Room, a mythical place where the most twisted fantasies were brought to life in vivid detail. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I reached out to one of the users who claimed to have access to the infamous Red Room. After a brief exchange of messages, I was given a link and instructed to enter at my own risk. With trembling hands, I clicked on the URL and was immediately greeted by a live video feed. What I saw on the screen was beyond anything I could have imagined. A masked figure stood in a dimly lit room, surrounded by an array of tools and implements that sent shivers down my spine. Bound and gagged before him was a terrified young woman, her eyes wide with fear as she struggled against her restraints. As I watched in horror, the masked figure began to taunt his captive, his words dripping with sadistic delight. And then, without warning, he raised a gleaming blade and brought it down in a swift, brutal motion. The woman's screams echoed through the room as blood spurted from her severed limb, painting the walls in a macabre tableau of agony. I should have looked away. I should have closed the browser and never looked back. But something inside me compelled me to keep watching, to bear witness to the unspeakable horrors unfolding before my eyes. For hours I remained transfixed by the screen as the masked figure tortured and mutilated his victims with a cold, calculated precision. Each grisly act seemed more depraved than the last, yet I couldn't tear myself away. It was as if I had become ensnared in a web of darkness from which there was no escape. When the stream finally came to an end, I was left feeling numb and hollow. The images of violence and suffering burned into my mind like a scar that would never fade. In that moment, I realized the true cost of my curiosity, the knowledge that I had willingly crossed a line from which there could be no return. Haunted by the horrors I had witnessed, I retreated from the dark web, vowing never to return. But try as I might, I could never shake the feeling that a part of me would always remain trapped in the shadows, forever tainted by the darkness that lurked within. And so, I am left to wander through life haunted by the memories of the Red Room, a grim reminder of the fragility of the human soul and the depths of depravity to which it can sink. Me and my friend Bucky were cautiously huddled around the dim glow of my computer screen, delving into the shadowy realms of the dark web. Among the darkest corners of this digital abyss, there existed a place known as Steak and Cheese. The name alone sent a shiver down my spine, conjuring images of violence and gore that I could scarcely bring myself to imagine. Yet, fueled by a morbid curiosity that I could not deny, I pressed onward, determined to explore the depths of this forbidden realm. As we navigated through the labyrinthine pathways of the dark web, we encountered numerous cryptic forums and unsettling images. Each click brought us closer to the unknown, drawing us deeper into the murky depths of Steak and Cheese. The air seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, suffused with a palpable sense of dread that hung over us like a suffocating fog. Finally, we stumbled upon a thread titled, "The Butcher's Symphony." With a morbid mix of curiosity and dread, I clicked on the link, unsure of what horrors awaited me. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy video feed that sent a chill down my spine. The video began with a scene of eerie silence, the only sound the faint hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Then, without warning, the tranquility was shattered by a cacophony of screams and pleas for mercy. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched in horror, unable to tear my eyes away from the gruesome spectacle unfolding before me. A figure clad in a blood-stained apron emerged from the shadows, wielding a gleaming butcher's knife with surgical precision. Each slice and cut was executed with a chilling calmness, the metallic tang of blood hanging heavy in the air. I could feel bile rising in my throat as the violence escalated, reaching a crescendo of brutality that left me numb with shock. Time seemed to stand still as the minutes ticked by, the symphony of slaughter playing out before me like a grotesque ballet of carnage. Images of blood and gore flashed across the screen, searing themselves into my mind like a brand. I wanted to look away, to escape from the nightmare unfolding before me, but I was transfixed, unable to move as the horror washed over me in relentless waves. When the video finally ended, I sat in stunned silence, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. The images burned themselves into my retinas, haunting me like a recurring nightmare. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on me, suffocating me with its oppressive presence. Bucky glanced at me, his face pale and drawn. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded numbly, my thoughts consumed by the horrors that lurked in the shadows of the dark web. As we closed the browser window and shut down the computer, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had glimpsed something beyond our comprehension, something that should have remained hidden in the depths of cyberspace.